Hello guys, welcome back to Code with Nani YouTube channel. So today we're going to discuss about function. So why we are using the function. So how do we use it and what are the types of function. So what is function firstly? So function is nothing but it's just a piece of code. Suppose if you want to repeat the same set of tasks or same set of control statements over a particular period of time like loops, so we'll use the function. Suppose as we discussed in the earlier, I'll give an example so then you'll get picture clarity about the function, so why we are implementing it. So every time, like whenever you go for the topic, it just has to be a three questions: why, how, and types. So why we are using it, and how do we use it, and what are the types and other stuff. So if you get clarity about these questions, so you can able to answer any type of question related to the data topic. So first question, so why we are using. So let's take an example. As we discussed in the earlier video, so we talk about what is a prime number. So how do we want to implement this prime number? So I'll give that example itself. So if you don't know what is a prime number, do check out my C++ DSA playlist and find out like what is a prime number, and you'll get to know everything related to the prime number. So let's start with an example. Suppose if I give ns, suppose ns sum 50. So what my program needs to do is, so it needs to print between 1 and less than x less than or 50. So it should print what are the prime numbers that are between from 1 to 50. So suppose we have the numbers 1, 2, 3. No, 1 is not a prime. It's not a prime. So 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, 13, and so on until the 50 numbers. So what are the primes that lies between the 1 to and 50? So it's gonna print you this answer. So how do we gonna do this? So after listening to this question, you will be like, so I'll check for each and every value and write the prime function. So that's not the case, right? Suppose 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 you had a prime suppose if you don't know any function, then how do you write? You iterate from I is equal to 2, I less than 50, I plus plus. Then for each I, so for each I, we had to write a function for the prime number. 82, I less j is equal to 2, j less than or equal to j less than n, j plus plus. If 5 divided by j is equal to 0, break. So that's how you write it. This function for the, let's make a flag variable, flag as 1, and if flag is 1, which means flag is 0. If flag is still 1, flag equal to 1, flag equal to 1. So if flag still 1, what does it mean? It is not a prime. It is a prime, sorry, it is a prime. So I had to return that. So for each value of I, what we are doing, we are implementing the same prime function or again and again. So in order to make it more modularity, like if you want to repeat the same task for each iteration, so what we do is we'll assign a prime function and we'll call that prime function. Based on that return value, we'll make it as we'll make it as out and cn statements. So that's the main use case of the prime function. So what is the main use case? To make code more modular, because we can able to break the program into smaller modules, and code readability, because see, if you check out this program, it is not more readable because it's an nested for loops and this inner implementation of the prime function. But for suppose if you write in a separate function, so it'll be easy for other people to read about debug their errors, or you can identify the issues in the code, and they can easily get to know about the program, as well as for reliability. And that's the use cases of the problem. So 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 we get to know why we are using. Now, well, how do we use it? Now let's get into this question. How do we use it? So, so what we'll do is, so we'll maintain type, type of a function. So type is nothing but so what the function need to be written, whether it just need to print something, just need to print something, or it should need return any value. So based on that, we'll use a type over here, function name. So whatever the function name and parameters and parameters. So that's how the function declaration. Then then in the main function. So 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 in the main function, we'll call that function. Suppose if we make a function as nani, the main function will like we'll call that function nani. So if it has parameters, we'll pass into the parameters, and that's how we declare the functions. So so we have answered the question, how do we use function as also, or do we use function as well? And let's get into the another question. So what is the third question that left is how? So how? So how? So what are the types of functions? So okay. So to answer the third question, what are the types of function? So generally we have two types of function. One is return function, another is void function. So what is return function? Return function is nothing but it should return a something value. Suppose if you want to calculate the sum of an array, so it should return the sum, right? Because it should return the sum value of at the end of the output. So then we will use a return statement. Suppose if you want to print an array, so we don't need to return anything. That's where we use void function. So it just makes sure to print out the entire array and it doesn't return anything. So that's the difference between return statements and void statement. And there is a parameter and non-parameter for both the cases. So what is parameter and what is non-parameter? So parameter. So parameter is like helping variables, or it's like that requires a values to calculate in that particular function. Suppose if a particular function has to calculate, let's take an example as previous before. So suppose if a function has to calculate the sum of the array, so what it requires is array, because it requires the array values. So in the parameter place we'll pass the array value. Suppose if you want to maximize, if you want to maximize value of maximum value of three numbers, so it requires three numbers. Those are three numbers will be passed through a parameter. Suppose if you don't require anything, like let's just take if you want to just take an input from the user and you have to print out twice or thrice of that number, so then you doesn't require any parameter. So you can just directly take in a variable and just print out. So for that cases you don't necessarily require a parameter. So in that case, type of cases we use non-parameter. So let's get understand through our syntax of those functions, return, everything. So as I mentioned earlier, suppose let's take sum. Like, let's take sum as a function name. Sum as function name, right? So what I told you, suppose if you want to return that particular sum, then what we use is return function. So what we return, so whatever the data type you want. Suppose you want an integer number, then you will mention int here. Suppose you want floating numbers, you will mention float. Suppose you want double, you will mention double. So whatever the value that you want to return, so you should mention that the data type of that particular value. Okay. So then it comes the function name. Function name. Then then comes then comes parameters. Parameters. So what is a parameter? Suppose, suppose if you want to calculate the values of sum of two variables, so you require basically two variables, right? So what are those two variables? So in A, you specifically has to mention the data types of that variables also. So that's why I'm mentioning int A, int B. So these are the values that is passing over to this function as a parameter. So what we are returning? Int sum is equal to A plus B, right? So what we have to return sum. So if you don't write this return statement, then it gives you a compiler error. But why we are using the return statement? Because we mentioned the function is a return function, and what is the type of the function? It is an int. That's why we are returning out the sum variable. What is the data type of the sum variable? Int. So as we are returning the int statement, then it compiles successful and it will give the correct output. Suppose if there is a case where you didn't require the parameters, then it directly you can do this stuff. Int A, just take B, C in A B, just take the input values of the A and B, and you directly see out A plus B, because you don't require any return statement to do the stuff. Because oh, sorry, because I mentioned I mentioned the return function. Let's set this type void void. Void is generally which doesn't require any return statement. It means it doesn't return anything. You just do those stuff whatever the function mean to do. So what we'll do? See out that was me, right? So let's get into the implementations of the video. Then you'll get picture clarity about this topic. So I'm opening Sublime. So if you don't have a Sublime on your local machine, then do check out my C++ DSA playlist. So we'll have an extensive video related to how do we install Sublime on your local machine. Do follow it and install it on your local machine. So let's try some of the examples. Suppose, suppose, as I mentioned earlier, if you want to calculate the sum of the two variables, let's make int x, y, right? And x, y. Suppose uh, first, let's take a case for uh, return statement. Suppose. Now, let's take for the return statement and parameter function. Return statement. As I told you earlier, what is the return statement? We had to mention the data type of the return statement. Take function name. So now what we are taking is taking the case of a parameter. So it should pass the parameter, right? So let's call out the function. See out sum of what the parameter that need to be passed, x and y, right? What I'm doing here, what I'm doing here, or I'll take this way. Int result is equal to sum of x comma y. So what we are doing here? We are making result as another variable, which is calling sum function. So it will call the sum function, and it will pass the values of a and b, and it will calculate the return sum. So it will calculate the sum of these two variables, and this sum will be stored in the result. So that when you make a cout statement for the result, it will print the maximum sum of that two numbers. So that's how this function call works. So let's take what is the data type of the first variable? For the first variable x, for the second variable y. So what we need to return we need to return x plus y, right? The sum of the two numbers. So let's print out this result. Return result. Page one. Let's take two numbers to 5. 7. So that's how it works. So we discuss about return statement and parameter. So let's take a non-parameter case. So in the non-parameter case, so what we do is we don't necessarily pass any type of parameters over here. So let's clear the parameters, and it has to return something, right? So for that, declaring x and y here, taking the values of c and x, y, and return. Yeah, return. And result is equal to just some functions because we don't have any parameter, so we don't need to mention anything. Yeah, just some function. Write the result. That's right. See, after we passed 2 5, we get the result as 7. Let's take another type of the function, which is a void function. So it doesn't return anything. So let's clear out everything. And void function with the parameters passed, right? So if you want to pass any parameters, first we have to declare the function and take the necessary input for that statements, right? Take the functions. What you're doing is let's take sum, and we don't we're pass it is not necessarily a return function, so we don't store that in a particular result because what void function does is it will do every stuff for you. So you don't need to store that result because it's not returning anything, right? But we had to pass the parameters because it is a parameter and void function, right? So for that we use a specific keyword void here. And what we did, what we take the parameters x and y, and what we had to do, we had to make a result value plus y, and we had to print out the statement, right? Let's just run the program. Get into the next case. 5 9, yeah. So that's how the code works. So let's take another final example, which is a void function and without parameters being passed to it. So there will be no parameters passed to it. So for that we need a input cases in the function itself, because if nothing is passed to the function, so how does function works? So we need to make x and y inside that function, right? So that's how it works. So we don't need to take the values in the main function, just call out the function as well without being passed the parameters. Then it works fine, I guess. Yes, it is working fine. Let's take another case. 7 8 15. So that's how these parameters and non-parameters as well as return and void function works. So this is the basic implementation of the functions. So tomorrow we'll back with the content of how the function calls, what are the types of functions called, call by reference, call by value, and some we'll get to know some basic implementation regarding the function, and we'll solve some of the basic question related to function also. We'll solve some of the interview questions tomorrow. So do check out my channel. Don't miss any video of my C++ DSA playlist. So if you like the video, do share with your friends, and subscribe to my channel. Hit that bell icon so if you don't want to miss any update in the future. That is for today video, guys. Thank you. Bye bye. See you tomorrow. Bye.